Hello, in this video, we are going to watch me making a batch of 5 face masks. Usually my batches are 28, as that is how many masks you can get out of 1 yard of fabric. I have pre-cut all of my materials. My fabric is cut 9 inches by 6 inches, and my elastic bands are 7 inches long. Here you can see I have already sewn the long 9-inch sides together of my mask, and I am currently inserting the elastic bands. I do double stitch over the elastic bands to make sure that they are stuck in place pretty good. And then I skip about 2 to 2.5 inches on that first 6-inch side. That way I can make sure I can turn my mask right side out when I'm done. I trim the thread on the part that I skipped, that way there isn't any odd tension in there when I go to turn it. I am sewing 1/4-inch seams on these masks, and I am lining up the edge of the elastic right to the edge of the fabric, so I have a 1/4-inch overlap on my elastic as well. At this point, I have sewn and donated over 500 masks. So in this video, I will show you everything that I've learned and how to make this process go faster and conserve materials. I do have another video which I filmed previously, which takes a closer look at how to actually make the masks in more detail. It is also about batching masks, but it does take a closer look at the steps involved in making an individual mask, whereas this mask video is more abbreviated. After 500 masks, I have gone through lots of materials, especially thread, which I had not expected. I have found that this first step in sewing the inside seams, it is best to use thread that you don't think that you're going to use anymore, instead of trying to color match everything, as you most likely won't even be able to see the thread that you're using right now. The fabric I am using for this project is, on side 1, regular quilters cotton. This can have a pattern or it can be solid. The second side, I am using solid flannel. In addition to the regular 6x9 fabric and 7-inch elastic, you can make other different sizes. The youth size is 7.5 inches by 5.5 inches of fabric and 6 inches of elastic. I have found that an 8-inch elastic band on the 6x9 fabric is usually better for men or people with larger heads or faces. You can find all these specifications as well as links to a PDF file in the description of this video. Aside from cutting and piecing together your fabric, this step can take the longest out of all of the steps. Now that I have finished sewing the 1/4 inch seams on the outside and inserting the elastic, I am just cutting off the ends to make sure that when I turn it right side out, the corners are nice and square. I am trying to get as close to that corner seam as I can without actually clipping it, as I don't want to break the seam and have things fall apart. Sometimes the elastic band will hang off, or if you're using headbands or ponytails, there might be a hard glue on the ends, and if that's sticking out or causing any issues, I tend to cut that off as well. Now that the corners are cut, I will turn the mask right side out. This is a good time for a quality check on your elastic bands, and as you'll see, every time I get one right side out, I'm actually pulling pretty tight on those elastic bands to make sure that none of them fall out. Now that I've got everything right side out, I'm going to push all those corners and make them nice and square. I also run my tool along the edge of the seams, as this is a great time for another quality check to make sure that you didn't miss any areas or the seams are too short, making sure that your edges are nice and square. So I just try to put as much pressure on those seams as I can as I go along to make sure that nothing's going to fall apart later on. During the ironing step, I fold in the part where I turned the mask right side out and make sure that's tucked under really nice and even. I also make sure that everything's nice and flat and the seams look good. Ironing also helps the process of pleating, makes everything fold up much nicer and easier to put pins through. The pleating step does require a little bit of finesse. As you can see, I'm folding them not quite in half and leaving about a half an inch on the bottom there. When I flip it over, I use that as my middle fold of the pleats and then fold the others to be even with that along the mask. I'm inserting the pins about 3/4 to an inch away from the edge. That way when I run it through the sewing machine, I don't actually have to stop to take the pin out and I can run it through without worrying about running it over. The first couple masks you make may be really hard to pleat like this. I've seen lots of people put a pin in for each individual pleat going the other direction, but practice does make perfect, as you can see. Now that everything's pleated, I actually turn the speed down on my sewing machine, and I like to use a leather needle or a denim needle that's thicker than the average one, as these pleats are sometimes a little hard to get through. You may even get bits of that seam on there, which means you're going through a lot of fabric. I've already broken and bent 3 regular needles, and I haven't had any issues with a leather needle at this point. As you can see, I'm getting my needle just 1 stitch past the previous mask before inserting the next one and leaving my needle down to make sure that they don't overlap. But I found that this conserves material and saves lots of time. Pro tip that I found out the hard way: start on the end where the pin comes out. Otherwise, if you pull them the other direction, you tend to stab yourself. After pulling the pins, I just trim the pieces apart. A lot of times, you don't even need to trim any of the little edges off because they are so close. Just cutting them apart leaves almost no thread left behind. And then you can start doing the same thing on the other side of the mask. Now again, this is just a small batch of 5. I have never actually done a batch this small before. Usually I do anything between 20 and 28. At this point, it's taken almost 20 minutes just to make 5 masks. My first couple, I was actually at about 20 minutes per mask, so you can see how this process has really cut down my time. So now I'm able to make more masks in a less amount of time. That way I'm able to contribute more to my local community. Here we have our completed mask. As you can see, I am not very good at putting them on. I make a much better seamstress than a model. I haven't really left my house, so I haven't needed to wear one. I've just been making them this whole time.